Hello, welcome to this new BMC Helix Remedyforce webinar. My name is Jair Ramos, and today I'm going to show you some of the best practices creating workflows. Remember that if you have any questions, please put those in the chat. I'm going to answer those there. So now let's review the agenda for today. First, we'll review what is a workflow. Then we'll do a quick comparison between workflows and process builder. Then I'm going to show you some workflow rules considerations that you need to take a look. Then I'm going to explain you what is a time-dependent workflow. And last but not least, I'm going to show you how to activate and deactivate the workflow rules. So let's start with the first topic, what is a workflow. As per Salesforce definition, a workflow lets you automate the standard internal procedures and processes to save time across your work. A workflow rule is the main container for a set of workflow instructions. These instructions can always be summed up in an if-then statement. So I would like to show you pretty quick where you can configure workflow rules in your org. So let's go to your org and let's go to the setup menu. Here on the quick find, let's type workflow. And then under process automation, let's click on workflow rules. So here, let's click continue. And here you will find all the existing workflows that you may have in your org. Here you can create some views to filter some of the workflow rules that you already have. Here you can create a new workflow rule. As you can see, this is the list of all the workflow rules that I have. So now let's do a quick comparison between workflows and process builders. Both are automated tools that you can use in Salesforce. But with workflows, there are some actions that you can perform, such as create tasks, update fields, email alerts, or send outbound messages. With process builders, there are a lot of more actions that you can do and execute. But in this case, we will be focused on workflows. Then we'll do another webinar for process builder. So now let me show you a few things that you need to know about workflows. So there are some workflow rules considerations that you need to take a look. So for example, the first one, each workflow rules applies to a single object. So let me explain you this point a little bit more. So if you go to workflow rules and create a new one, here on the object list, you can only select one object. You cannot select multiple objects for the same workflow. Workflow rules on custom objects are automatically deleted if the custom object is deleted. So basically, if you create an object in Salesforce and you also created the workflow rules for that object, if you delete the object, those will be automatically deleted. Salesforce processes rules are executed in the following order. First, validation rules, then assignment rules, then auto response rules, then workflow rules with immediate actions, and then escalation rules. So this is the Salesforce execution order for workflows. Workflow rules can be triggered anytime a record is saved or created depending on your rule criteria. Rules created after saving records don't affect those records retroactively. So something that I would like to mention is that after you create the workflow and activate the same, it will only apply for new records or the records that you are editing after you create the workflow. So existing records won't be triggered by this workflow. I mean, you need to modify the record or create a new record. Saving or creating records can trigger more than one rule. It means that you can have multiple workflow rules for one single object. And so for example, after you create an incident record, different workflow rules can apply for that record and perform the actions that you set up for each workflow. We are ready to move on to the business cases scenario. The Director of Support Services Department for Acme Corporation asks you to create two different automated processes. The first one, every time a user replies to an email from an incident, and if it is closed, an email should be sent to the client to request to open a new incident. So now let me show you how we can build this first process using a workflow rule. So let's go to your org. Now that we have under workflow rules, let's click new rule. Here we need to find the incident history object because that is the object that stores when a client or a staff replies to an email. So let's go to incident history and click next. So now we need to provide a name. So let's provide any name for this workflow rule. It's up to you. It's something that you need to identify this workflow. After we provide a name for this workflow rule, we need to select the evaluation criteria. In this case, we need to select create, because every time that a user replies to an email, it creates a record on the incident history object. Then we need to put the criteria that we want for this workflow rule. In this case, you can see that we can select fields from the incident object and also from the incident history object. First, we need to detect the action. So for this case, we need to select incident history action equals email received. This specific action will help us to identify if a user replies to an email. So the next criteria that we need to check if the ticket is already closed. As you can see here, we have multiple incident fields that we can select. In this case, there is one specific field named state open that helps us to identify if a record is closed or open. Let's select state open equals false. It will help us to identify if the ticket that they are replying to is already closed. So now let's click save and next. So now, as you can see here, there are a lot of actions that we can perform using a workflow rule, such as field update. In this case, we need to send an email alert. So let's click on email alert and let's provide any name for this email alert. Then we will need to create an email template. We'll do that in a few minutes. Here, this message needs to be sent by the client or the user who submitted the case. So let's click on the drop down menu and click related user, and let's drag the client ID. So now let me show you how you can create a template. In this case, we are going to create something pretty quick just to show you how it works. In order to create a template, we need to go to setup. On the quick find, we need to type template, and let's select classic email templates. Click on new template. Here you will see different type of templates that you can create. In this case, we can create a text template, something easy so you can see how it works and how you can create a basic email template. So here you need to select the folder. In this case, I'm just gonna use the default one. Here you have to provide a name for this specific template. And here's something important to mention is that you can do it more complex. You can add more fields. You can display additional information related to the record. But as I mentioned, I just want to make something pretty quick. So let's put the subject of the email that they will receive, and also the body. This is something pretty quick so we can test if our workflow is working or not, and if it is sending the email alert correctly. So after we put all the data that we need into the template, let's click save. And something important is that we need to check the checkbox available in use, otherwise it won't show up on the lookup field for template. So if we go back to the email alert, here on the lookup, we should be able to identify or find the email template that we have just created. So let me put incident on the search, and let's scroll down until we see the one that we created. We already checked the checkbox available for use, so it means that we should see it here. Okay, perfect. So we find it, and here you can select the from email address that will have our email. Let's click save. Okay, so now that we finished, we are ready to click done. Then we can activate the workflow rule and test it. So let's click activate, and as you can see, now our workflow rule is active. Now I would like to show you how you can test this workflow rule. So in order to do that, let's go to Remedyforce console and open any record, any open record. So in this case, I'm going to select the first record that I have. And here, something that I would like to do is from the action menu, I'm going to send an email to the client. In this case, I'm the client. So here on the description, let me add something. It's up to you if you want to add text. In this case, I'm going to add something just to show you how it works and how I'm going to receive that email. So after you finish with your email, let's click send. So now let me check my mailbox and see if I received the email. As you can see, I successfully received the email. So now in order to test our workflow rule, let's go to the record and close it. So let me change the status to close and click save. So now after we save the record, we can confirm that the status is set to close. And now let me go to my email services just to get the long email address from Salesforce, so I can reply to it and update the record. So let me open any of my email services. Let me take the long email address and I'm gonna reply to the email that I received so I can update the record. In this case, I'm gonna update the incident history. We will see it. So now let me click reply. You can put any text. So for example, if I were a normal user, I'm going to put something like I have another question, but the case is already closed. So let me send it to the long email address in Salesforce. So let's click send. And now let's go back to the record and see if it is updated. I mean, in this case, the incident history for that particular record. So now let's go to the Remedyforce console. And as you can see, the pop-up window that I just received, it is the email template that we created a couple of minutes ago. So it means that our workflow rule is working fine, and it is triggered if we receive an email and the incident is closed. So let me click reload and we should be able to see the record here, the email. Okay, as you can see, the action email received, and that's the email that I sent. And if we confirm, the status of the ticket is closed. So it means that our workflow rule is working as designed. So now we can move on to the second process. The second process is when a record is created, or if it is modified to priority 1, the ticket must be assigned to the incident management queue. So now let me show you how we can build this. Okay, let's go to your org and we need to follow the same process we did for the first task. We need to go to setup and then on the quick find, let's go to workflow rules. Click on workflow rules. Here, let's click continue. Then let's click on new rule. For this particular task, we need to select the incident object because the priority that we need to check belongs to the incident object or the incident record. So let's click next. Here you need to provide a rule name for this workflow rule, something that helps you to identify what it does. In this case, I'm going to put something like priority 1. We need to select the third criteria because it will be triggered if it is created and also if it is modified. So for the criteria, we need to identify urgency and impact. And for my case, if the impact is high and the urgency is also high, it will make a priority 1 case. So let me just select the data for both fields and let's click save and next. So now let's take a look at the options that we have. In this case, we need to select new field update because we need to change the queue name if the priority changes to 1 or if we create a case with priority 1. So let's provide a name for this new field update. So here on the list there is a field name owner, which means queue. Actually we can select a staff or a queue. Let's click next, and after that a pop-up field should show up. Okay, here for owner we need to select queue. If we check the lookup options, we need to find the incident management queue. In this case I'm gonna select the incident queue. So let's click on incident queue, and here you also have the option to notify the queue, but we already have some workflow rules that do that for us. So let's click save, and let's click done, and we are ready to activate our workflow rule. So now we are ready to test the workflow rule that we created. So let's go to the Remedyforce console and take a ticket which does not have priority 1 already. So first let's take a look at the queue for this particular record. Okay, it does not have a queue, which is good. Let's set up the impact to high and urgency high. That will make a priority 1, and it should make a change to the queue to incident queue. Perfect. So it means that our workflow rule is working fine on edit. So it should also work for create. You can do that later. You can test on create, but it should work there. Now let's review the time dependent workflow. Basically, it is an action that is going to be executed in the future based on a specific criteria that we have set for the workflow. When that specific time passes, the workflow rule reevaluates the record to confirm if it still met the rule criteria. If the record does, the workflow rule executes those actions. But if it doesn't meet the criteria, or if the criteria changed, it won't execute the actions. Actually, the workflow rule is going to be cancelled. I'm going to show you with a specific example how it works and how a time-dependent workflow can be cancelled. So now let's review a business case scenario. Let's do it with a business case scenario. You were asked to create an automated process where if a staff member set the status of the record to resolve, after 3 days, it should be automatically set to close. In order to accomplish this requirement, we need to create a workflow rule with a time-dependent action to change the status to close. So now let me show you how we can build this in Salesforce. So the steps are pretty similar of what we just did before. So we need to go to the org, go to setup. On the quick find, let's go to workflows. Let's click on workflow rules. Let's click continue. Click on new rule. Here we will work on the incident object. Then next, you can create workflow rules for all the objects that you have in your org. Let's pick up, or let's set rule name for this particular workflow rule. For the evaluation criteria, we will need to select create and every time is edited after it meets the criteria. And the condition is going to be if the incident status, so let's go and find the incident status field. Okay, here is equals resolve. So this is going to be our rule criteria. Let's click save and next. Here at the bottom you will see the time-based workflow actions. So here I'm going to select 3 days after this workflow rule is being executed. You can see the different options that we have based on different date time fields that we have for the incident object, but in this case I want to execute this 3 days after the workflow rule is triggered. So now that we have set a time base that it's going to happen in future, in this case 3 days, we need to create a fail update. If you remember from the previous webinars, there is no field for the status on the drop down menu. So as a workaround, we need to create a template and assign the template to the record. So let's do that pretty quick. So let's go to the Remedyforce administration tab. Here, let's search for template and let's click on templates. Here, I think I already have one that changed the status to close. Let me just search for close. If you don't have one, you can create a new one. It will take you less than 1 minute to create it. So here, as you can see, the status, it set the status to close. It applies for the incident object. So now we are ready to take that template. So let's provide a name for this field update. And here we need to search for template. Now let's use formula. And here we need to put the template name. Let me just copy it. And I just forgot, we need to put double quotes between the template name. Now we can click save. Once we finish with the action, let's click done and we are ready to activate our workflow rule. Let's click activate. It was successfully activated. So now we can test this time-based workflow. So let's open any record and let's change the status, in this case from open to resolved. Let's click save. And I'm gonna show you a quick thing where you can check if it is working fine or not. If we go to the setup menu and then quick find and let's type time, there is a section named time-based workflow. In this case, we need to set up a filter where the object contains incident, then search. Here you can see actually this is the record that we have just modified. This is the workflow rule name, and you can see when it is created and when it is going to be executed. If you check the dates, it is going to happen in 3 days after we triggered the workflow rule. Something that I would like to show you, and we already saw that on the workflow rules considerations, is if we change the workflow rule criteria, it will automatically cancel the time-based workflow. As you can see, let's click search and we change the status to open, so it automatically cancel the time-based workflow. If you want to execute the actions, just remember that you need to keep with the same rule criteria. So now let me show you how to activate or deactivate a workflow. We already saw how to activate a workflow, but there are also different ways that you can deactivate a workflow. So if you go to setup and then on the quick find, let's go back to workflows. Let's click continue, and here on the list view you can see that you can deactivate a workflow directly from here, or you can click on the workflow rule name and you will see a button to deactivate it. Let me just activate back that again. But there are two different ways that you can do that. If you want to learn more about workflows, remember that you can visit the following links in order to get more information about each topic that we saw on this webinar. Now let's do a quick summary. As you could see, creating a workflow is not a difficult task. Actually, it will help you to automate different things within your work. With workflow rules, you can create a task, send an email alert, update a field within the record. You can also send an outbound message. There are different actions that you can do. You can also perform some actions in future, just like we did with time-dependent workflows. This is also very helpful because it allows you to update records or send email alerts in future using a workflow rule. And then I also show you how to activate or deactivate workflows. Remember that this webinar is going to be available on our YouTube channel after this session. If you have any technical question, please submit a case with us. You can do it via web, phone, or email. And remember to follow us on all our social media, BMC communities, Facebook, on Twitter. I hope you like this webinar about workflow rules and best practices. So stay tuned for the next one.